The next is the cyber cafe rules. So who is using earlier, we are all using the phone and we are using our own tabs and internet at home. Earlier used to be cyber cafes. So in case somebody is using, any user's data has to be maintained by the owner of this cafe. Person using the age, identity proof has to be maintained so that in case there's any fraudulent use of the internet and things like that, there should be some sort of liability cast upon the user. So that's why they made it specific for maintaining this sort of rosters for them. The next would be the information technology rules again of 2011, talking about electronic service delivery. Here basically it's for the government to process certain applications for licensing, for certifications and things like that. They've actually talked about what is applicable and what is alright by them. So this is the other set of rules that they modified. So I know it's very boring to look at numbers, so that's why I said unless you get charged with certain sections, this would not be relevant at all. So the next would be the information technology intermediary guidelines. So this is important because we are using telepsychiatry, we are using portals, we are using a lot of platforms that actually allow us to book appointments and actually consult online. So what is applicable in this sort of scenarios is what is mentioned here. So section 22(1)W talks about this sort of issues where the intermediary refers to a person who receives, stores and transmits the electronic record on behalf of other person. For example, I'm consulting and actually seeing a person on the cyberspace for consultation purpose. So I maintain certain basic records of this person. I maintain the prescription. So this is what is going to govern this sort of intermediary platforms that is going to be used. There's also one important section here that talks about who can be exempted and who will not be liable for any sort of fraudulent practice that happens. Section 79(1) here talks about if the host or any third party communication link is there and data or information is there in it, it shall be not be liable for the same in case it's just an intermediary. For example, I'm using a space, I'm actually storing and I'm actually transmitting and I don't have any liability, but I'm not modifying, I don't have access to decide who is receiving it and who is actually using it. I only license for somebody to use it, beyond that I don't have anything. So this sort of blanket exemption is actually given under 79(1). So who would be protected and on what scenarios you would have this sort of legal protections, what is mentioned here. So here, if the function of intermediary is only limited to providing access alone, it's just an internet access provider, he does not initiate the transmission or select the receiver, he has no control over it, and he does not select or modify the information that is there in the transmission also. For example, if it's a question of prescription has been there, he does not have a discretion to change the doses, he does not have a discretion to change the duration of the prescription, so he will be considered intermediary here. And he still has to observe due diligence while discharging duties, in the sense that no harmful contents is transmitted is what is specified there. I thought I'll just look at some case laws and scenarios that's there which could be pertinent in some sort of medical scenario, because if there are no medical precedents to the cases, they look at other sort of case series that are there, and sometimes case laws becomes the rule here. So in Christian Louboutin versus Nakul Bajaj, in the Delhi High Court, what exactly happened was, again here they were trying to claim the blanket exemption that they were intermediary and they were just a platform or an online marketplace, completely removing the ring of protection is what they're trying to say, that we are protected because we're just an intermediary here. But the court took a ruling to say that since they are a platform who had a control on the MRP or discounting certain products, for example, the product is displayed as 100 rupees and I'm giving a discount of 32% there. So just because you have an access to modify the price of the product here, they said that you are no more intermediary because you have absolute control on the pricing system. So the blanket protection under section 79 was repealed on this case. The other one was the Amway versus 1mg Technologies. This is relevant because it's something like medical product. Here the product was sold again at a discounted price, and here they again claim that they should not be liable for any sort of punishments because they're just an intermediary and they were just transmitting information is what they claim. But contrary to that, the court said that you are here as intermediary and you're making profits. So when you're making profit, you're no more just a service provider and you're charging a facility, and also the service fees is very evident and it's a commission. So they said you are no more intermediary and liable for punishment is what the court interpreted here. So this is relevant because we deal with platforms, and that's why telemedicine platforms, if they're active facilitators, for example, they're helping you to get patients. They sometimes get involved in diverting certain patients who want to see you to some other practitioner because it can come as a pop-up. They're trying to modify the pathway of the patient seeking consultations here, so they cannot claim exemption as intermediary in these sort of scenarios. Coming to the latest amendments of the rules again, this was as late as October 28, 2022. Basically, they tried to again modify the intermediary definitions and try to make them more clear here. The amendment rules talk about information technology, ethical media boards again, and here they've actually talked about any misleading content, and there's a blanket ban to say that even if you're intermediary, if there's any false, untrue, misleading content, you cannot go with the requirement of such sort of visibility here. And reasonable obligations on intermediary is cast here, and you're required to take reasonable efforts to make sure you comply with this sort of rules is what is mentioned here. You cannot just blanketly explain and say that your intermediary is what is mentioned. So just to make sure that the intermediaries are more liable when they're actually transferring information is there. Coming to the punishment aspect of it, looking at the Indian Penal Code, you have section 292, section 354C, 354D. All these things is talking about punishment aspects of it when he's talking, when he's publishing pictures and things like that. I'll just not get into details on this. So, what is relevant to us is psychiatric practice guidelines. It was through a huge push for courtesy COVID that this became a law of land, and the legal status was given by the NMC Act 2019. It had to specifically look at certain provisions, that is regulations 3.8 and appendix 5, to modify. Earlier it was in-person consult, so anything that had actually to do with psychiatric consult and these sort of terminologies had to be modified. So they had to modify these things and give it a legal framework state. So in case psychiatrists are intending to provide online consultation, it's also mentioned that we have to mandatorily do an online course within 3 years of notification. And it's the responsibility of the NMC to come up with such a course. We have to see it because if you look at it, it's 2019, it's already 2022. So it can come up anytime. We're still working on this sort of module. It can be an online module. We'll have to make sure that we are accessing this sort of module, complete it and get certified to provide telepsychiatry services. Till such time we are providing, but once it's available, it becomes mandatory that we have to finish this course before providing consultations online. It also makes it very clear, even during telepsychiatric consultation, we have to uphold the ethical norms of ICMR, Indian Medical Council, etiquettes and ethics regulations of 2002 here. So, just because it's on the cyberspace, we are not exempted. I don't know what happened. Looks like they want me to end this presentation.
Somebody is hacking you. You are under attack. Cyber attack. Cyber attack.
Okay, I got it on. I think there's some glitch. So it would want me to run through the slides and say it's all done. Yes.
Under which section the service provider?
It will be on the organizers. The stand of care. Here there was a psychiatrist who was consulting a child online, and subsequently after the way you see a person in person, the way you see a person online, these are similar, and we expected to follow the similar standard of care. And the liabilities will be similar in what you say. You cannot say that there's limitations in technology for whatever wrong is happening. You must have a diagnosis at at least before you prescribe and do something is what it says. If you don't have, you should have a provisional diagnosis. So the nature of the interaction is similar. So they say this is the standard of care and you have to follow whatever you do as in person. Coming to jurisdiction of specialization, we are governed by section 106 of the Mental Health Care Act 2017, where it very specifically says that no medical practitioner shall discharge any duty or perform any action not authorized or specified or recommend any medicines or treatment which is not authorized by his field of profession. So we as psychiatrists will be authorized to do this sort of actions under the Mental Health Care Act. Anybody who is not registered is not qualified enough to prescribe, do intervention. So that makes it very clear. This is a settled law to say that who will be allowed to do psychiatric practice. Anybody authorized by the government by way of a gazette, or somebody who is listed as the practitioner for a psychologist or a social worker or a mental health professional category, whatever you would have chosen, is the only person who will be authorized in this act to do it. So this is the jurisdiction based on specialization. So if you look based on territory, the dilemma here is still a grey area here simply because state governs most of it in a country like India. And health is a state subject. Though you have central laws, you also have option for the state to modify this. So we are all governed by the state medical councils. Though we have the central council, IMS are there, the Medical Council of India is there. Though they have a registry of all doctors maintained, but we are liable to follow what is there in the state. But for telepsychiatry, what is assumed here is anywhere in India you can practice. And in case there are any liability suits that come in, the person wherever he is situated, that's a consumer, the client wherever he is situated, based on that state, you will be liable to follow certain rules, and if it is different, you will be liable, is what it says. So unless there's sort of clarity and changes that's been brought out by way of amendment, I think this sort of grey area still remains. We are expected to practice anywhere in India through state psychiatry, but when it comes to state laws, it is going to be the interpretation according to state legislations there. So what are the responsibilities we have when we are consulting somebody online? So we have a responsibility to make sure the identity of the patient is established, and we should know, even though there's no patient will not consult. So if it's on process, there has to be an authorization, and we should have a mechanism for the patient also to verify the credentials of doctor. So the platform that we use should have our registration number, our address of consultation, emergency contact details, our qualification, all those things should be there for the patient also to verify and choose us. So there's some sort of obligations cast upon us there also. And the presence of patients is essential. In case the patient is absent, there has to be an authorization. We can use certain pre-filled patient proformas before telepsychiatric consultation just to make sure we understand the context of the consultation there. And we have to follow the Mental Health Care Act 2017, irrespective whether it's online or offline. So we are liable by the same acts as mentioned in the standard of care judgments. Whenever there's a case of emergency, we have to make sure we're bound to refer them for in-person consultation or to see the nearest RMP for immediate intervention, and we should not deal with crisis, not prescribe online. You can just listen out to them, make some evaluations, and make sure he's referred for the nearest practitioner to get an evaluation done there in person. But psychiatrist has a discretion to choose whether he can do it in person or online. So we have this sort of discretion. Suppose you're not comfortable, you can ask him for an in-person consultation. So we also have the responsibility to keep the patient's data and privacy and confidentiality secure. We have to issue prescription only after we have a diagnosis, or at least a provisional diagnosis. So suppose you don't have a diagnosis, I don't think we should venture into prescription. We should write some 1 or 2 differentials at least and have some sort of provisional diagnosis before we prescribe. I think all of you would remember this case, Deepa Sanjeev Pavaskar and WhatsApp. Can anybody tell me what happened and what do you remember about this case? It was in news all over, IMA took action. Every practitioner started putting on the notice board to say that the doctors are being prohibited by consulting on WhatsApp and we will not offer services on WhatsApp as an implication. Yes, Pawan?
She gave some prescription on WhatsApp, and after that the child did not improve, and
yes.
As a neighbor only they filed the case.
Yes, basically what happened here was there was a operative case and the patient got discharged, went back home, they developed some sort of complications and the doctor was out of town, and the family members called them for help, and so the practitioner said that please pass the phone to the chemist, and they gave instructions on the phone to the chemist for dispensing certain medicines. Eventually the complication worsened and they reached the hospital. Finally the patient died. So here what happened was the court was very stringent here and said that the prescription happened without a proper diagnosis and hence was liable for culpable negligence here.
The prescription, what happened was the person who gave the prescription, he didn't see he just saw once. These people operated on the patient and they went away on holiday, and one of my friends, he was
Modification in the Medical Council of India regulation, nor was there a separate legislation there in the Act to say that this is a legal entity. But we were all the time doing telepsychiatry, and we assumed that it was okay and we were doing in good faith, and just to keep up to the moral responsibility as doctors we have. Not that you try to help the patient was the wrong intent here, but the fact that you didn't have a diagnosis at the time of prescription, you had not evaluated the patient, you should have referred to somebody and not prescribed is what the court held. And you called up and told the chemist what to dispense. So when things goes wrong, they can easily pull up and make the doctor liable is what I was trying to emphasize here. So they were charged with culpable negligence and they wouldn't get bail. So I think only thing that happened was the Supreme Court intervened in this case. They said that, oh my God, again we are the same thing. To come up with some regulation to prevent this sort of menace of fake psychologists happening. So another important thing is about asynchronous consultation here. So we use telepsychiatry means very commonly, but doctor to patient or an RMP to RMP is another mode that we use. So in case you are using an RMP to RMP mode, at the time of your consult, it has to be sure that you have an opportunity to evaluate the patient independent of the RMP. It cannot be a video recording of your RMP that he is actually evaluating the patient. You see that sort of recording and you make a diagnosis and prescribe. So this is not allowed. It is asynchronous. It has to be in synchrony and you should have an access to see the patient on live. Coming to prescription, I'm sure all of us have this sort of dilemma. We write diagnosis. So just to make sure we have the responsibility of section 23 of MHCA, which talks about rights to confidentiality. You can actually try and prescribe medicines just writing the code of ICD or DSM, whichever you would prefer, and not actually put the diagnosis up front. We also have to take explicit consent before we transmit this sort of prescription into a pharmacy. For example, there is additional liability that's going to come in case you are insisting on teleconsult, the patient wants to see you in person, you are busy on a holiday and things like that, but you cannot use this as an excuse. If the patient has actually insisted on in-person consult, you insist on a teleconsult, you are actually liable again. If you are misusing the patient's personal and clinical data in some form of data setting, then it happens hacking and all those things. So we'll have some sort of liability if you are responsible for storing the patient's information. Asynchronous consultation will become liable. Prescribing prohibited or restricted medicines, particularly the sedatives, hypnotics, NTPA drugs, all those things are prohibited. So if you prescribe them, you are liable. Indulging in unethical methods of soliciting patients' advertisement is again a liability that we are going to get into. So digital footprints. Recently, I had a case where the young couple were married, and 3 months into the relationship, all that he had was he got the access into her Instagram, WhatsApp, and he was looking at the email and actually looking at all the communications. He was able to look at the location that the patient was actually, not patient, sorry, the lady was actually, he actually looked at relationship matters, and it was actually a whole post-mortem into what was happening, and he had a total view of how this lady was in the last 2 years, looking at just digital footprints. And I think digital footprints have a direct impact on the doctor-patient relationship also. Accepting friends' requests from social platforms from the patients also is an issue that we constantly face with. It's good to have separate accounts, and if you are searching for patients on social media, trying to analyze them and trying to know them for psychopathology and related issues is different, but trying to befriend them is again an issue. Monitoring symptoms can also be done using monitoring to the status, blogs and social media activity sometimes. Generally based on the mood, they also put in the status. So based on the status, you can also understand the subjective mood status also. I think there's no second thoughts on maintaining professional boundaries here. We cannot use the same account to actually have a professional account and social media account on the personal front as a different space here. If you look at our very famous psychiatrist, Samitra Bhattacharya got into trouble with these things again. Do you know about this controversy? No. Basically what had happened was there was a PIL in the court asking for ban of meat during the festive rituals of Jains. So apparently Dr. Samitra Bhattacharya had just put in that, okay, you're banning meat, but at least you can post the photos of meat. Okay, so the immediate caption was, psychiatrist instigates netizens to share pictures of meat to offend Jains who are PIL seeking ban on ads of non-vegetarian food. So he got trolled for the next 1 week completely for no fault of his actually, because it was there's no separate account for a professional account and a personal account, and he had just put in with no such intention, but he actually got into controversy, and this trolling happened for 1 week. A lot of messages pouring in, and he got trouble with this. So I think whatever we mention in our personal account could be actually misread as an official statement. So we have to be careful when we are putting these sort of statements, is what I thought I should say here. So coming to forensic aspects of cyber psychiatry, so we have cyberbullying, cyber stalking, online sale of designer drugs, pedophilias and sexual predators. We also have cyber suicide. We have crimes by persons with mental illness, also crimes on persons with mental illness. It could be by and on, and also crimes targeting psychiatrists. So that's another aspect that we should be careful about. Okay, what would be the role of forensic psychiatrists in these sort of scenarios? You could generally get a reference from a school or a guardian, and you could be asked to look at this sort of scenario. You could also be referred from by a court to be an expert witness for a child under treatment. You could also be conscious about what are trends. Generally, to understand a scenario, I think it's good to look at what's the popular trend and example. Sometimes it could be confession pages, sometimes it could be trolling, sometimes it could be meme making. So the trend keeps changing. I think we have to be updated. And forensic psychiatrists may be called to assess the motive, intent, and severity of the phenomena of cyberbullying also. So we will have some sort of role to play here. I think this is a busy slide. We talked about cyberbullying in the earlier sessions. So basically, we could be called on to understand and assess whether there is actually a cyberbullying, to look at the victim's psychological status. Does he qualify for a diagnosis? And the person who's doing bullying also maybe need to be evaluated to see if he also qualifies for diagnosis. In case you're planning an intervention, you need to maintain a lot of data logs and look at the handling of therapy sessions and things like that. So just to look at all this thing impartially also, you could be called as an expert. Next one would be online scene of designer drugs. I think this is an ever emerging market. We have to keep in touch with all the newer molecules that's designed in lab. It comes with newer names, and there are so many websites which sells these sort of drugs. In case you come across this sort of selling happening, I think it could be an extended liability that we could actually be involved in informing the police and related authorities to help track down this sort of sale of illegal substances. Cyber suicide was also talked about briefly here. Most of the time, suicide is described as a personal choice. The methods of suicide can be so detailed. Sometimes suicide assistance and packs can also be done, which will be have a ramification across the people involved there. Sometimes suicide can be live streamed, and that can be extremely traumatic to people viewing it. Games such as Blue Whales, which provides promoting suicide and non-suicidal self-injurious behavior. So I think the concept here is so different and difficult to understand. Anybody and everybody who's not psychologically sound enough, healthy enough to manage a crisis is what they think that they should eliminate, and they feel that these people don't have a place to stay is what is the phenomena there. And by eliciting these sort of impulses in them to harm themselves is what is targeted. There's a lot of online groups promoting these sort of suicidal behaviors as a coping mechanism. So in case I decide to commit suicide, I want help, there's so much of innumerable literature that's been available which gives so much of detailing about what I should do, how I should do, where I should get, and what's the best way to make sure I stay in the suicidal pact and not get survived. So there's a lot of assistance that's there available online. So there's need for addressing these sort of phenomena and also address issues of suicide prevention. So if you look at the online space, is given a lot of opportunities for people to groom, make relationship and develop relationship with particularly the children, and also luring them into sexual relationships. So they can also be involved with the persons with mental illness. So our patients are much more suggestible and vulnerable. So there could be a chance for them to actually get involved in sexual acts. So there's need to access websites suggesting parental control. My friend here was asking about parental control and how do we actually monitor. If you actually Google and look at parental control apps, there are more than 50 apps that's there for iPhone users and even Android users. The one that's famous is Norton, and I think Google parental sharing link. I think this is what my parents who consult me was saying. But I think there's so many options available. I think each one has a lot of structuring. A child can be allowed to use the internet for education purpose, for gaming so much, for social media so much. You can all define everything. And if you know what sites they are using, you can actually define each site and actually tell them they cannot exceed this sort of limit. And suppose they want to exceed this sort of limits, the control is still within you. And you can actually ask them to change this sort of 10 minutes addiction, 15 minutes addiction. This available is what being told. I have not been able to do it in my own house, but I've heard this from the patient's story and the people who consult me. So there's also need to educate school children regarding divulging private information online. So it becomes an added responsibility because we don't know how much to divulge, what to divulge. As adults, we imagine a child would detailedly explain so many things and actually get into problematic relationships. So this also was discussed earlier. So we are looking at hacking sites. The latest one that was there was hacking the LinkedIn site. And the person here showed no remorse and he's planning to do further crimes while under trial, and he is suspected to be having ASPD traits here. My question is, person having mental illness, axis 1, axis 2, neurodevelopmental problems, it could be autism and later spectrum disorders. Does he need any concession or leniency under law? What do you think?
No.
Yes?
No, I would say no.
Intentions is important. Anything else? Do you think he needs a lenience under law?
In which case the law becomes meaningless. Law is designed to reform, and that is part of the therapy. That is therapy by the law. And the punishments are designed to not only exemplary for the patient itself, but also example for others. So I think we should allow the law to take its own course.
What do you see your final take, sir? There's a person with mental illness, so should he have any lenience? Because the whole discussion here is what is statistically normal, what is moral, what is not moral, what is the psychopathological basis for all this behavior is what to look at. So should he have any leniency and why?
That's something the judge should decide.
No, sir, I think
Beyond a certain point, I think we should stop trying to espouse the cause of our patients, whatever. Because the society has got its own way of looking at things. We can engage with society and ask them what is okay and not. But in an individual case, I think we should allow society to take its own course. Because they have got their own systems of reform. Part of their objectives are to actually get patients to feel better by undergoing jailing or whatever, punishment. It is a way to also make him realize that something is wrong. That is society's way of looking at things. So I think we should allow that to happen and not unduly try to influence society to think what is this right or wrong. It's up to society to decide what is right or wrong.
Say that just a concern that if you find biological causes for many things which are keeping our people in prison, I will one day be forced to let them all go. But what will happen to society and where will they all go? So I think there is a whole dimension to this. I think your question was particularly because this person is ASPD, which is typically one of those things which sits on the fence. We are not entirely convinced it is a treatable psychiatric disorder, even as professionals. So if it was Asperger's syndrome, for example, And I cited that case earlier where a certain leniency was shown because it was concluded by the authorities that he couldn't help himself. So I guess that to some extent the diagnosis at this point in time, and we are all guided by what we know at this point in time, the diagnosis is a guide. But I would also say if you have a diagnosable psychiatric disorder, then obviously you need the opportunity of treatment. And in that sense,
He's making decision that he does not need treatment. He is saying that he does not have a diagnosis. Only when it comes to punishment, these people are trying to use a diagnosis and trying to get some lenience. So I'm here to say that if somebody has an illness, that does not become a blanket rule. It could be ASPD or an autism spectrum disorder. He should not have any leniency based on diagnosis. He could have leniency based on capacity. If he didn't have the capacity to know what is right and wrong at that point of time when he's doing, if he can prove that, that should be the only lenience. Otherwise it becomes double-edged, sir. Everybody says, I want the pleasure of not being treated because I have rights. And when it comes to punishment, I don't have the capacity to decide, so I don't want punishment is the logic here. So it becomes a double-edged sword, sir.
I suppose we come to psychiatry which is insight. So obviously if I think there's nothing wrong with me, but there is something wrong with me, then there is a concern about my insight. And of course we do have provision in the law that when someone clearly lacks insight, we can treat them against their will. It's just that we can't do it willy-nilly. We have to go through a judicial process today. So I guess I would still say mitigating factor, mental health, one should look at, one should consider that in the way that one is sentencing that individual.
Thank you, sir. Easy for us to prove that there's no lenience needed because he becomes capacity by all means. I think.
Just wanted to tell one thing that in our ever get absolved by the law. So I mean, right from gangsters, shooters, everybody will be more or less. So I don't think that in our country anyone with ASPD will get reprieve or even for that matter any reduction. And in that matter, I would go by what sir was saying that the usual rule that applies to mental illness in other fields like McNaughton and others that govern should be applicable here also. So if he was having a treatable disorder which had impaired his decision making or which had made him unaware of the consequences, the usual stuff, then it is fine. Or else I think
what if he had seen you're
bipolar disorder and if he has refused treatment, then so I think he may get a reprieve. Because not the same in all cases. Supposing he has a psychosis and the psychosis has made him take this decision by virtue of his psychosis related to this thing, maybe he will get reprieve.
But my argument here is he has chose not to get treated.
So that was his insight issue, na? Again a part of his illness.
In the whole act, there's no talk about insight. He only talks about capacity, no capacity or intact capacity. So insight is taken off from the decision making here. He had the privilege of seeing the best psychiatrist, he had the privilege of getting treated, but he chose not to get treated. If he's chosen not to get treated, he does not have to claim any of the leniencies of law is what I'm trying to say here. I think for lack of time, we'll just go forward. So another effects of the old age also can contribute to the vulnerability and being victim for online deception. So now if you look at what happened in one of the recent scenarios in Mumbai, psychiatrist's account was hacked and messages were sent to all the patients asking for money for treatment of his wife. So even mental health professionals can be at risk. So if your data of contacts is there in the cyberspace and it gets hacked, these sort of messages have gone in to take financial help from your clients. And AIM servers hacked, Enhanced servers hacked. I think hacking has become the norm now. And it has made us so vulnerable to leave any information and digital footprints on the cyberspace. The new thing that's invading into our online platforms and education programs recently is the Zoom users having Zoom bombing. So you get unauthorized people accessing your education program, they start chatting, sending forms, inappropriate content. Sometimes the mic is kept on, constantly coughing, honk of the vehicle, talking something on the background just to disrupt your own activity. So this is happening even in Zoom platform users. So I think we become vulnerable as practitioners also. I thought just to look at the scope and future trends, this is an emerging field, a lot of things are ununderstood and I think there's a lot of scope to look at expanding guidelines and practitioner needs to look at the legal and ethical implications of all these guidelines. The need for understanding psychopathology on the background of newer growing trends in technology. Recently, I was listening to one of my colleagues talking on the current online platform using the words that's there. So it's all Greek and Latin, almost formal thought disorders. The youngsters and teenagers use so many newer terminologies that's not there in dictionary. I think we have to keep constantly evolving, updating ourselves to look at what's the in trend. Digital footprints play an important role in development and expression of personality. I think it's very important that we start looking at this sort of angle, and including cyber safety in mental health programs becomes very important. And it's our duty to train children, because the most vulnerable. We were not exposed and we did not have this sort of distraction at all. They are bombarded with plenty of this sort of opportunities, and it becomes our responsibility to make them responsible users. So I think we should intervene at the level of school mental health programs and do some sort of work. Thank you so much for patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Manish. It has been an exhaustive presentation, especially with reference to various laws that govern us in the practice of telepsychiatry and other things. I think, to the lack of time, I would just allow just 2 questions from the audience.
Charged with homicide and all those things. Regularly, we give phone numbers to our patients, maybe a hospital number or landline number. They ring to us and ask us, sir, we are experiencing this problem. And you had said that without examining, you are not supposed to prescribe. How to handle practically in day-to-day practice?
If it is a regular patient for follow-up patients, I think till you are comfortable, I think we should use it only for follow-up patients. First time patients, you can use it for evaluation. If you're not comfortable, don't actually prescribe on the first time consults on the telepsychiatry video consultations also. If you are sure about diagnosis, it's the usual patient where it involves just dose correction and adjustments without adding any new drug. I think it's comfortable for us to do. For example, somebody has gastritis, I reduce the dose. Somebody is not feeling sleepy, I just increase the dose a little bit. So these sort of corrections can be done. But anytime you feel it's a gut feeling, if you're not comfortable, please ask him to take the trouble of seeing you or the nearest practitioner. I think there's no hard and fast rule that every person who consults you and pays for you online, you have to give a prescription. If you're sure on the diagnosis and you know what it is, please prescribe. Otherwise, please defer it and ask him to see you. Let him take the trouble of seeing us.
One more question, sir. Is there any, sir, asking, sir, prescribe drugs for 3 months and 6 months as we are going to Dubai, Saudi, some other countries? So your comments regarding law point, how long you can prescribe in 10 seconds?
I think there's no using psychotropics. I think anything in the dose range of something that's enough to kill himself is something that we have to make sure we are using with caution. For example, if it's lithium, even 2 weeks prescription is enough to kill himself. So it becomes our liability when we prescribe for 3 months. So these sort of grey areas are there. There's no clear cut duration for which it's been mentioned. But whenever somebody is asking for a longer duration, make sure they give you a letter to say that I'm traveling abroad, I'll be unavailable for consultation. So I want to carry more drugs and things like that. As a policy in our hospital, I'm saying I don't prescribe anything more than 6 months. So I'm just keeping it as a policy. It has no legal backing for this, but I'm saying we are not comfortable to prescribe anything more than 6 months. So let them take the trouble of seeing us in between.
Thank you, sir.
Just to, because these medicines cannot be stopped abruptly, and if he is traveling and unable to contact you, to take the enough stop. Something like that, better you
need to continue indefinitely. I think such practical solution that seems to be the most appropriate thing here.
Many times they cannot come back, and I tell their relatives to come back and follow up with me, and I have they are abroad and I talk to them on phone either on video consultation. So can I prescribe medicine?
Yes, because actually you are effectively using technology. You have a diagnosis.
The patient is not in India.
I think in terms of jurisdiction of control, it's Indian territory for us.
Right.
Technically, patient is not there in India. If the family member has an authorization and consent to consult on his behalf, I think you are legally valid.
Okay, so we can
He is the first editor of Journal of Telangana Psychological Medicine. Dr. Pawan Kumar Kulkarni has done a
journals international and national. He is current worked as professor and head of the department of the DCMS. He is vice president and president-elect Indian Psychiatric Society, Telangana State Branch. He is a past vice president of Hyderabad Psychiatric Society. He is a past general secretary for Indian Association of Private Psychiatry and co-convener for Doctors IMA National. I think he received a recent award from the IMA for the good contributing doctor from the psychiatric. So he has various orations and awards to his acclaim. So I ask him to start the.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Dr. Communication. Our session would be a kind of revision session because since morning we are hearing about psychiatry and cyber psychology. I would like to start first with Dr. Pani Prashant. I would like to know what do we understand by cyber psychiatry or cyber psychology? Is it cyber psychiatry or cyber psychology?
I have a great definition sort of a thing. In our understanding, okay, wherever the cyberspace, that is the internet or the World Wide Web which is there, what effect it has on people's psychology, our lifestyle, our social interaction, our personality development as well as how it is evolving people's behavior over a period of time, and then how it is influencing psychiatric illnesses in the way of understanding of psychopathology, our understanding of new illnesses which are developing because of the internet, and then how we are changing diagnosis as well as management strategies. All these things put together would subsumed under cyber psychiatry and cyber psychology.
Thank you. I would like to ask Dr. Pawan, what is so nice about it? The topic is good, bad and ugly. So I want to know what is good about it or what is so nice about this cyber psychiatry or cyber psychology.
Thank you, sir. Actually, since morning we are hearing about this cyber psychiatry, and mainly our focus or emphasis what we are looking up on or looking at were the negative effects. And this is the first time actually the only thing where the positive side of the technology can also be visualized. And as speakers in the morning have mentioned, change is one thing which is constant and we have to imbibe to that, we have to get used to that, and this advance in technology can also be made good use, and as we know, it has entered into almost all the paradigms, whether it be academics or consultations or even interventions also, therapies also. So I'd say earlier when we are not available, someone has to replace us, but now with the advent of online consultations. I've seen today Dr. Varshi and Dr. Naveen were doing online consultations even though being here. So these are some of the things, wherever you are, you can still attend to your patient. So these are the positive sides of it. And with this technology now, even virtual reality is coming up, or real virtuality, as Sujit Sarkar sir has mentioned, Gavade sir has mentioned in the morning. We can also have interventions with CBT programs, or all these things can also be taken up, especially for phobias and all these things. So making good use of these technologies, where for example OCD, and these technologies can be put to good use. And not only that, the CBT companions that we are getting as an application, they will also aid us and help the patient be motivated for the therapy for a long period of time. So I see these are the positives of it, and that's it.
Can you add on something?
So whenever there is internet which is available, it has opened up so much information which is available to anybody at the click of the finger or at the tip of their finger. So a lot of times patients are able to identify themselves with a symptomatology or come across that I have read this, that this is what is my symptoms, I am able to identify myself with the symptomatology. Previously maybe diagnosis like gender dysphoria or some diagnosis which are difficult and there's some stigma and then there's too much personal information involved. So such diagnosis or identifying with diagnosis, availability of criteria online is somewhat helpful to doctor also, because they're coming for treatment. Previously they would not have thought of what are the options available for them. Is there a treatment for their condition? Is there something wrong with them? So to identify, to get awareness, increase awareness, like Dr. Manmohan Raju is running a YouTube channel on awareness of psychiatric illnesses. So the good thing about the reachability, increased awareness of patients and educating patients is possible through internet, and it has helped a lot of patients to identify with their symptoms. Not only that, technology also has helped people to identify their problems, like let's say I track my sleep, okay, and then come to the doctor and show, see doctor, I have not been able to sleep for 4 days, my tracker shows this, I have been only able to sleep 4 hours, 3 hours. It's now quantifiable, just not depending upon what the patient says that I am able to sleep or not, but you're able to quantify also whether what the symptomatology to actual reality of what the symptoms are. In that way, awareness as well as understanding of illnesses have increased. Not only that, in the sense that for therapeutic interventions, like Dr. Pavan has already said about CBT, virtual reality for phobias, and cognitive behavior therapy, and telepsychiatry is a big boon. Otherwise, all of us would not have survived COVID, okay, according to me. Because of the telepsychiatry only, actually it has made an immense advantage for most of us. Okay, and then interventions not only through internet, but also, like let's say for autistic children there are artificial intelligence bots which are available. For dementia patients there are available assisted living devices which are available, which they can use. They can track somebody online to, so that at least people who are taking care of them, if a person with autism is developing an anger episode, the initial hyperventilation and increased pulse rate would trigger when you know that the patient is not comfortable with this environment, so intervene immediately. Something like dementia, there are bots which can help to be a companion bot or a helping bot. So these technology along with internet has helped us in many ways to increase our awareness as well as treatments.
Yeah, very well said. I would like to make a point here that I have attended one CME in Jaipur, where one of our psychiatrists, he is using CBT and he's almost earning around 15 lakhs a month by using technology. You won't believe it, but he's doing that. So it can be helpful, positive for psychiatrists. He just have to monitor what kind of CBT is being given, and he is doing that kind of work. Definitely it is helping all of us, the good part of it. I would come to bad part or ugly part. I would ask Dr. Manmohan to talk about the bad or ugly part of it.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is a wonderful topic which I am very much interested to hear, and from the morning I had a feast of things. I am more attracted towards 2 words, that is dark E personality. In some speakers' word, dark E personality. Second one is psychopath. I don't know why I am attracted towards those 2 words. So in this topic I want to divide into 2 parts. First one is the usage of technology, that is cyber technology, in the treatment point of view as a psychiatrist. But I am not much interested towards that part. Why? Because there are senior psychiatrists, they already, most of you told that things. But as a person, as a common person, how much cyber technology or how much internet usage affected as a doctor, as a person, as a human being, before the pandemic and after the pandemic, before internet and after the internet, how my personality or how all of us, we changed a lot. So it may be good or it may be bad, but in my point of view, before evolution of human being, that is ఆటవిక రోజుల లోపల మనిషి లోపల ఉండే ఇది ఏదైతే ఉందో, ఇది ఈగో సూపర్ ఈగో అంటే మీ అందరికీ తెలుసు, ఆల్రెడీ మీరు అందరికీ అది అవగాహన ఉంది. మనం మనసుకి ఏదనిపిస్తే చేసేదాన్ని ఇది అంటాం. దట్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్ బిహేవియర్ నౌ వీఆర్ సీయింగ్ ఇన్ ఆన్లైన్. I am outside, I may be like this, but I don't know what I am doing. I know, but most of you don't know. What I am doing online, that is my original personality, which I am secretly hiding. Not only for me, everyone in the group, in this hall, everyone in the building, everyone in the city, everyone in the state. That is internet technologies unveiling or revealing our original either animal instinct outside of our moral and ethical background. That is one thing. It may be good or it may be bad. Second part is, as you said, the ugly or bad part. Most of the younger generation who are in the backbenches, they can understand what is ugly, what is bad for you may not be bad and ugly for me. not only me, for younger generation it is quite normal. Previously we used to have love marriages, it's a big news in our relatives, it's a big thing. Now love marriage is a normal thing. Now marriage is a compulsory thing. After 10 years I am going to see marriage is an option. పెళ్లి చేసుకుంటారు లేకుంటే లేదు. అట్నే ఆన్లైన్ బుల్లింగ్, ఆన్లైన్ సైబర్ క్రైమ్ అవన్నీ ఇప్పుడు ఏదైతే మనం క్రైము, అడిక్షను, ప్యాథాలజీ, సైకోపాత్ ఇట్లాంటి పదాలు వాడుతున్నామో నా అంచనా ప్రకారం ఒక 10 years తర్వాత అవన్నీ నార్మల్ అయిపోతాయి. ఎందుకంటే అందరూ అదే అవుతారు. వాళ్ళు సైకోపాత్ అనేది ఏమన్నారండి, అందరూ అదే అయిన తర్వాత అది బికమ్ నార్మల్. ఎవరైతే అవి ఇక్కడ ఎవరు అందరం పైన షర్ట్లు ట్రౌజర్స్ వేసుకున్నాం, ఎవరైనా ధోతి కట్టుకుని వస్తే వాళ్ళని కొంచెము అవుట్డేటెడ్గా చూస్తాం మనం. అట్నే ఒక 10 years తర్వాత ఎవరైతే మనం ఇవాల్వ్ కాకుండా ఆన్లైన్లో మన పాత మోరల్ వాల్యూస్, ఎథికల్ వాల్యూస్ దగ్గర ఉంటామో యంగర్ జనరేషన్ దృష్టిలో మనం అవుట్డేటెడ్ అయిపోతాం. సో యాజ్ ఏ సైకియాట్రిస్ట్ we should not stick to morals or ethicals which are taught before the corona, before the internet. We should upgrade and we should change. Pawan Bhai చెప్పినట్టు చేంజ్ ఈజ్ ద పర్మనెంట్ థింగ్. చేంజ్ ఎంత కావాలి అంటే మన మొరల్స్, మన ఎథికల్ వాల్యూస్, మన సిస్టమ్ అంతా కూడా చేంజ్ అయినప్పుడు మనం కూడా చేంజ్ అయితేనే పేషెంట్స్కి ఇంకా ఎక్కువ కనెక్ట్ అవుతాం, పేషెంట్స్కి ఇంకా ఎక్కువ హెల్ప్ చేయగలుగుతాం. అట్ ది సేమ్ టైం మన పర్సనాలిటీ చేంజ్ అయితే ఏంటంటే మనకు కూడా కాన్ఫ్లిక్ట్స్, ఘర్షణ తక్కువ ఉంటాయి. అట్లా కొన్ని కుటుంబాల లోపల కొంతమంది చేంజ్ అవుతున్నారు, కొంతమంది చేంజ్ అవుతలేరు. అది కపుల్ కాన్ఫ్లిక్ట్ కావచ్చు, ఇతర ప్రాబ్లమ్స్ కావచ్చు. పాత మోరల్ వాల్యూస్కి అతుకొని వాళ్ళు అక్కడే ఉంటుండ్రు, కొత్త వాల్యూస్ని క్యాచ్ చేసుకొని ముందుకు పెట్టాలి, ముందుకు వెళ్తుండ్రు. ఈ రెండింటి మధ్య ఉన్న ఘర్షణ కూడా యాజ్ ఏ పర్సన్గా, యాజ్ ఏ సైకియాట్రిస్ట్గా, యాజ్ ఏ టీచర్గా, లేకుంటే జూనియర్స్కు ఒక సీనియర్గా మనం గైడ్ చేయాల్సిన అవసరం ఉంటుంది. థ్యాంక్ యూ.
Thank you, Dr. Manmohan. I would like Pani Prashant to add on to some terminologies like cyberbullying and what is cyber stalking, those things.
So basically, when we talk about bad or the ugly part of the cyber psychiatry in that sense, when we look at the first thing about the psychopathology, the presentation itself, what is normal versus what is abnormal, the line between the two sometimes gets very difficult for us to treat. I'll give you an example. A few days back I had a patient who was, who client, I can say, should not word patient maybe. He was a first year MBBS student. Okay, his mother brought him to me. So when actually he was playing this game called Dota 2. Okay, I think Dr. Lokeshwar also projected that in that one of the, it's a multiplayer game where you could get into a professional player and earn money out of it. Okay, so when he was interested, he was interested in 9th class, he started playing on that. In 10th also he was playing it, and when he came to the intermediate, the parents promised him, you work hard for these 2 years and get an MBBS seat, we will allow you to play. Okay, so he worked hard, he went to the hostel, studied hard and got some rank, and he got a private medical college, he got a seat. Okay, in between he used to come and play whenever there were holidays, but rest of the days he would be serious about studying. But once he came back and he started MBBS, they said once he started learning MBBS, he went to the medical college, he realized that medical college itself is hard, it's not easy, and he has to put in so many hours of studying. So then he told the parents, no, I'm not going to do this now, I'll take a 1-year break and play my Dota 2 and become a professional player, okay, and then I'll get back to MBBS. Okay, so everybody tried to convince him, you should not play like this, it's going to ruin your life and all, but finally all of them gave up and he tried. And he went up to a national ranking of 3. All over India, he was the 3rd player to play. Okay, so after 1 year, okay, he realized that he could not play anymore to become a professional player because you have to put in more hours and more years, at least 3 to 4 years you have to put in. So meanwhile, it's becoming an addiction and he is not able to stop. That is when he came. So where is that addiction part which came into place? Where was he a professional player? When I went back and to see what it is, whether it is there any difference or not, there are studies which show that professional players, there is an increased gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, which is not against, whereas in the patients who are addicted, there is a changes in the white matter. Okay, so there is some neurobiological correlates which they are talking of in patients, the players versus who are, okay, addiction. Okay, so in that sense, what is normal versus abnormal to diagnose something which is realistically present or not, it's becoming a challenge because of the advances in the thing. And we all have to be technologically be aware as to what is happening. Otherwise, I am not from the millennial group. I am an immigrant, digital immigrant. I was born in 1974. So For people who are living in now, my son keeps on talking of so many jargons which I don't know. I have to sit with him to understand, and then what is that, what is happening, why, how does this play, how do you play this, what happens at the end of it. We have to monitor, we have to be technologically aware and keep up track. Otherwise, we are not likely to understand where the patient is going wrong, or what is the psychopathology, where it is starting, how the patient is becoming from depression or anxiety or addiction. We can't really understand, okay, what is realistic. And developmental abnormalities, okay. A lot of children who are exposed to internet and media, or the more number of screen time, they lack social skills. They are not developing speech, they are not developing interacting with other children. A lot of times it gets misdiagnosed as autism, okay, and then a lot of times I've seen kids who have been misdiagnosed as autism. All of us have seen both, maybe I don't know. And then once we pull that thing back and use the proper stimulation and put them back into social circles, they develop into. So there are bad sides to internet exposure, and then over self-diagnosing, like I said, cyberchondria. Okay, so hypochondriasis is because of seeing it in the internet, by every small anxiety, basically anxiety and hypochondriasis. Patients who see these symptoms on net and then over-imagine and then talk about, okay, they have this diagnosis, they come with papers, okay, sir, you have serotonin is reduced in my brain, but this article says that there is no serotonin reduced in brain, doesn't cause depression. You are telling me a lie, okay, and then you are giving me medicines for that, okay. And then there was another patient who was trying to tell me that clozapine can induce seizures, and you are giving me that, and then he came up with, I have these intrusive thoughts which are coming. It says that clozapine can cause intrusive thoughts, and you are not doing anything about it. Okay, so he's sending me PubMed NCML link to show me that these are the things which are there. Okay, so what I'm saying is, we do psychoeducation, we do the right thing, we explain the patient, we have to spend a lot of time. It is no more that I am the doctor, I am telling you, you take it. Okay, that era is gone. Okay, we have to be completely give the information, we have to be technologically aware, we have to be clear and transparent to the patients, otherwise we will be taken over by the technology. Okay, when it comes to diagnosis, if you can look at it, DSM-5 has already put that internet gaming disorder in one of the appendixes to be further classified as a disorder. Okay, so the new jargon which is coming, even ICD-11 is coming with gaming disorder. Okay, so these diagnoses which are actually not there in the previous, now they are getting added because of the internet and then the ability of using the internet and the outreach of it, and then all these criteria which are coming up. Okay, and there are so many evaluation scales and apps. You will be mind-boggled to see them. Let's say I have depression, I want to use any app, you just put it in the mental health and app in Google Play. You'll see so many apps. None of them have actually been designed properly. Most of them, 90% of them, have not been designed by a psychiatrist or a psychological health team. Okay, most of them are unstructured, and then they give you random things. Okay, so which app do I use and how do I monitor myself? Okay, there are a lot of apps actually give you self-monitoring, diary, entering your thoughts, okay, all the personal data which they take, and then they give a feedback sort of a thing, which is again an artificial intelligence driven. It's not a psychiatrist who is doing, or a psychologist who is on the other side who is evaluating your this thing. So there is a danger of over-diagnosing and okay, getting into trouble because of the same. And coming to when we come to treatment part of it, okay, as Dr. Minaza right now said that CBT is being given online. Okay, so telepsychiatry, as actually Dr. Mahesh Gowda has put up in a very nice presentation. I was really appreciate of his efforts, because telepsychiatry should be used. Okay, it is very useful tool for reaching out patients who cannot come, who have simple follow-up to do or refill of prescription. They are doing absolutely fine. It is really a boon for such patients. But it should not be used for everyone and everything. Every diagnosis on the roof need not be used by telepsychiatry. It is abuse of telepsychiatry. And then as we have quacks in general practice and physical practice, we do have quacks on internet. Okay, even if you track to psychiatrists, there are a lot of homeopathy, Ayurvedic, okay, psychologists who are being labeled as psychiatrists on the net. Okay, then they are not having any credentials or any registration. Okay, so we do end up into misuse of the system can happen both from the therapist side as well as both from the patient side. So we have to be careful as to what we are trying to evaluate, and okay, most probably when we are using telepsychiatry, we have to physically evaluate the first visit, at least should be physically well. most probably all the follow-up results, and even if you are evaluating on first time to prescribe a medication, unless you are comfortable, it's always better to ask the patient, okay, I have evaluated you, I think this is the problem, why don't you come down to my office once, let's sit and talk, and then maybe I'll write a prescription to you. Okay, so we have to balance out what is good as well as what is bad at the same time. And as Dr. Minaz was asking, cyberbullying, cyber stalking, okay, the children are not really aware of what is happening on the internet. It's like a open market. They don't know what to go, where, which corner to see, what not to see. And lot of times artificial intelligence has taken over all these apps over the mobile phone, that they suggest, if you like something, it will suggest you 10 things which you might like. Okay, in that way, the people can get carried over to something which they didn't start to think of. Okay, I didn't start to think of, but I ended up in something completely different. And bullying is something which can happen, trolling, bullying, which can happen through social media, okay, which can be very difficult for a child. It can cause trauma and then developmental issues, again, affect the personality in the person which is developing. Okay, stalking is something which is somebody who is watching a person over the internet, watching through all the social media and then trying to see what this person is doing in an internet. It's almost like following, but virtually doing it. So the uglier side of it comes when the sexual harassment, cyberbullying, cyber stalking, sexting is what is called, sex texting, which is sexual content is sexting. So all these things become very ugly to deal with. And most of the times it becomes more of a social cause rather than a psychiatrist or a psychiatric illness which is per se coming up. Okay, so this is what my perspective would be.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Khammam. Can Dr. Pawan, can you talk about information overloading and